a lot of fantastic HD-2D games out there now. I mean, we got Octopath Traveler, Triangle Strategy, the Dragon Quest HD-2D remakes, The Adventures of Elliot, and even at the end of the year, we've got Final Fantasy Resonance. It's become one of my favorite styles of games. And every time Square Enix announces another one, I'm immediately hooked. But there's one game I keep finding myself coming back to. Well, I mean, aside from Triangle Strategy, you guys know I love that one so much, but it's actually Live Alive. It's such a fun game. When this remake launched back in 2022, a remake of a Super Famicom game that never left Japan, obviously people are going to be excited. I mean, this is a JRPG that had spent nearly 30 years trapped behind a language barrier, and it was finally getting the worldwide release that it deserved. Everybody praised the visuals, the soundtrack, and the care that Square Enix put into modernizing a genuine cult classic. But after that launch window, the conversation just kind of disappeared. People moved on to the next thing, the next big announcement, and also kind of releasing around the same time as Xenoblade Chronicles 3 didn't do it any favors either. And like I said before, if you think of Octopath Traveler, Triangle Strategy, all those other HD-2D games, I feel like Live Alive never comes up in that conversation, and I think it's kind of unfortunate. Because the more time passes, I'm pretty convinced that this is the most underrated HD-2D game Square Enix has ever put out. And over the next few minutes, we're going to talk about just that. So before we get to it, don't forget to like and subscribe, leave your comments and thoughts down below. Have you played it? Do you like it? If you haven't played it, I think today's video is going to give you the incentive you need. So let's get to it. I think the biggest reason Live Alive gets overlooked is that it's kind of almost hard to explain. This is a JRPG with completely different protagonists spread across different time periods, each with their own story and gameplay style. Yeah, on paper that sounds like a mess. Most JRPGs introduce you to a world, the party, your combat system, and then you kind of settle into a comfortable rhythm for the next 30 or even 100 hours. Live Alive takes one look at that and just ignores it. One chapter throws you into prehistoric times where nobody speaks at all. The entire story is told through animation. It's so funny and clever. And then you're suddenly in this ancient feudal Japan era where the game rewards stealth over combat. And then not long after that, you're trapped on a spaceship in the distant future, and it stops feeling like a JRPG altogether and starts feeling like a classic sci-fi horror film, almost like Aliens or something like that. And it's probably my favorite chapter in the game. It's just so different and so cool. And then it changes again. The Wild West chapter becomes a race against the clock, preparing a town for a showdown. Present day feels like Street Fighter, honestly, and then near future goes all in on giant robots and anime energy, and Imperial China tells one of the most heartfelt stories in the game. Every chapter feels like the devs of this game asked the question, what haven't we seen in a JRPG before? Let's do that. Instead of stretching one of those little ideas into a 20-hour campaign, they explore everything interesting about it and then move on before it overstays its welcome. There's no filter here, there's no grinding, of course, and just when you think you figured the game out, it changes again. Now, the HD-2D remake is so stunning. I love the pixel art. The depth in every environment somehow is nostalgic and modern at once. I mean, that's what the HD-2D aesthetic does, and it does it so well. Partner that with Yoko Shimomura's soundtrack, it's so exceptional, honestly. I mean, every era has its own musical identity, which is part of why every chapter sticks with you. There's so many fun battle themes and fun music that plays, but the near future battle theme is still one of my favorites. But here's where I think Live Alive became a victim of its own success. When the remake launched, almost all the conversation centered on how beautiful it looked. The visuals, the lighting, the fact that this forgotten Super Famicom game had finally got an official English release after 30 years or so. All that praise was completely deserved for sure, but I think it almost overshadowed what made this game special in the first place. Because once you stop admiring the visuals, what's left is a game overflowing with some really great ideas. The graphics are there to get your attention for sure, but they're not why I still think about this game years later. It's the structure, it's the pacing, and it's the fact that it cycles through ideas in a really fun and creative way. Again, it doesn't get stale at all. One of the biggest surprises to me when I finally played this game was, after playing years of 40, 60, 80, 100 hour plus JRPGs, Live Alive is very short and condensed. It doesn't overstay its welcome. Each chapter is the right length, and it's not afraid of that either. Live Alive is really a great example of reminding you it doesn't need to be enormous to leave a lasting impression. Sometimes it's more memorable because it knows exactly when to stop. Every chapter introduces something new, like a setting or a style of storytelling, and before it has a chance to wear out its welcome, the game moves on to something else entirely. There's no point where you're thinking, okay, I get it, let's move on. The game's already one step ahead of you. Look, when I first played it, I was constantly looking forward to whatever came next. I knew it wasn't going to be another dungeon or another town or something else. Like, everything was so unique. It keeps that sense of curiosity alive all the way through. By the time the credits rolled, I never felt like I had wasted my time. Now, we've got to talk about the combat in this game because for some people, this is going to be the sticking point. At first glance, it looks pretty simple, next to Square Enix's more modern games, but I think it's a really good fit for what Live Alive is trying to be. Battles happen on a small grid where positioning matters. Different attacks have different ranges and areas of effect, so you're always thinking about where to move rather than just mashing attack. Every character has their own unique thing as well because each chapter introduces a different cast, and you're always learning new abilities instead of relying on the same party for 30 hours straight. Is it the deepest combat system Square Enix has ever made? Probably not, but that's not what this game is aiming for. It doesn't need 50 mechanics or endless customization. The combat exists to support everything else the game is doing, and it does it really well. And I think that's something more modern JRPGs can lose sight of. There's an expectation now that everything needs hundreds of skills stacked on top of each other. Sometimes simplicity is just what a game needs. It's fun, it's satisfying, and outside of a few boss fights that really make you pay attention, it's simple enough to let you focus on what makes this game special. The variety and the feeling that every few hours you're stepping into a new, completely different JRPG. Now, if you haven't played this game before, we're going to get into some spoiler territory, so you might want to skip this section, but you've been warned, so let's get on with it. For most of the game, it feels like you're playing completely separate RPGs with 7 protagonists at that point, 7 different stories that all seem to kind of perfectly stand fine on their own, and then just when you think that you've seen everything the game has to offer, it throws one final story at you, the Middle Ages. At first, it feels like the most traditional JRPG section in the game. You play as Orsted, a heroic knight who rescues a princess and defeats a demon king, and, all that kind of typical stuff, but eventually he has everything stripped away from him. He's betrayed, he's blamed for things he didn't do, he loses the people closest to him, and eventually gives into hatred, abandoning his humanity and becoming Odio. And that's the moment that everything clicks into place. You realize that these weren't just 8 random stories sharing the same game. Every era had been exploring the same destructive cycle of hatred from a completely different perspective. And Orsted's fall ties all of those ideas together. So again, what looks like a collection of disconnected adventures suddenly becomes one much larger story, and every chapter you've already played starts to make sense a little bit more. And what I love about that reveal isn't just the twist itself, it's what it does to the structure of the game. Of course, like I said, all the hatred starts to spill out throughout the timelines, and we've already experienced that by fighting the bosses. And then because of that, the heroes from every era are drawn together to confront him. And it's not just an excuse to throw all the protagonists into one party, it really makes sense within the story. Hatred has become something bigger than one person or one moment in history, so it takes all the heroes from every point in history to finally put an end to it. And that's why the finale works so well for me, because you've spent some great time with each of these characters individually, and by the time they finally stand together, it feels so great. It doesn't feel forced at all. It's like a class reunion of sorts, because these are some great characters that you've made a genuine connection with over the course of the entire game. And people talk about Octopath Traveler for doing a similar thing, but in my opinion, Live Alive was Octopath Traveler before Octopath Traveler dared to have separate stories, 8 separate stories, and different character things all interacting. Like, Live Alive did this back in the 90s. Now, it's not the longest game you'll ever play. It's not the biggest, most complex battle system you've ever played. And honestly, those aren't reasons why games stick with me. Something that's just short and sweet and left a great impression. That's why I love Live Alive so much. There's so much alliteration there. Love Live Alive. Every chapter has its own identity, commits to a completely different idea, and then moves on before it becomes stale. It never feels like it's stretching itself into a 50-hour game, and every new era feels like discovering another game entirely to some extent. And that's also why it stands out in a genre often built around familiarity. JRPGs have a formula that works for a reason, and Live Alive asks, what if we did something different instead of doing the norm? Not every idea here is revolutionary at all, but once you put them all together, you end up with something that feels really fresh, decades after it was originally released. So when people say, what's the best HD-2D game? It's Triangle Strategy or Octopath Traveler or Dragon Quest or, Adventures of Elliot, or maybe at the end of the year, Final Fantasy Resonance. I really think that we should be talking a little bit more about Live Alive because it deserves to be part of that conversation too. It took a lot of risks being what it is, But if you play it, it's never going to stop surprising you from beginning to end. And that's why, if you ask me, I still think Live Alive is the most underrated HD 2D game, and I hope you guys play it if you haven't already. So thank you again for watching today's video. It's a wonderful game, and I'm so glad to finally chat about it to some extent. And yeah, we'll see you guys on another video next time. Bye.